Here's something that will mess with your head. Moving the USS Ford closer to the target wouldn't make it stronger. It would turn it into a sitting duck inside what analysts are literally calling a kill box. The Persian Gulf is shallow, packed with mines and lined with coastal anti-ship missiles. Getting closer means getting killed. So the most advanced carrier strike group in history is caught in a trap where moving forward is suicide and staying back means the jets can't reach the target. That's the paradox we're breaking down today. 1,240 nautical miles. That's the actual distance between the Ford and the target, and that number is what breaks the whole carrier dominance idea wide open. The FA-18E/F Super Hornet is the jet doing the heavy lifting on the Ford. It's fast, it carries a serious weapons load, and its combat radius is around 450 to 500 nautical miles. Combat radius means how far it can fly out, hit something, and still have enough fuel to get back. So do the math. 1,240 miles to the target, 500 miles of reach. You're already 800 miles short before the pilot even thinks about the fuel burn during the actual fight over the target. So the obvious answer is aerial refueling, right? You launch KC-135s or KC-10s, they meet the jets somewhere in the middle, top them off, and suddenly the range problem is solved. That's how it works in exercises and in lower threat environments. But this isn't that. A KC-135 is roughly the size of a Boeing 707. It flies in a straight line, at a predictable altitude, at a predictable speed, with zero weapons and zero stealth. It shows up on radar like a stadium scoreboard. There is nothing about that aircraft that lets it survive in contested airspace because it was never designed to. It was designed to operate where nobody is shooting at it. Now think about what that tanker becomes in this specific scenario. It's the most valuable and the most vulnerable thing in the entire strike package. Every jet behind it depends on it to get home, and the adversary knows that. Their air defense systems, sitting in the mountains, are specifically built to track and kill exactly this kind of target. Slow, non-maneuvering, flying in a predictable box. One missile hits that tanker, and every jet that was counting on it is now flying on fumes with nowhere to land. The terrain makes all of this worse. These targets aren't sitting out in the open on flat ground, where you can approach from any direction. They're buried inside the Zagros mountains, hardened under millions of tons of natural rock, placed specifically to make the approach as long and as dangerous as possible. The people who built these facilities thought about the problem from the attacker's side. They put the target at the worst possible distance for carrier-based aviation and then wrapped it in rock. So here's where you actually land. The jets can't reach the target on their own. The tankers that could extend their range are too slow and too exposed to survive the trip. And the target itself was deliberately placed to make both of those problems as bad as they could possibly be. That's not bad luck. That's planning. The adversary didn't need a better jet than the Super Hornet. They just needed to put the target far enough away and bury it deep enough that the math stops working for the attacker. Analysts call this geography beating technology, and it's exactly what's happening here. The Ford hasn't fired a single weapon, and it's already hitting a hard wall, not because of anything the enemy did in the air, but because of where they put things on the ground years before this moment. So the next instinct is to just move the ship closer, shrink the gap, make the math work again. What happens when you try that is where this gets really dark. Pull up the Persian Gulf on a map and really look at it. It's not open ocean. It's a narrow, shallow body of water about 615 miles long and at most 210 miles wide, with one way in and one way out. The Strait of Hormuz, which squeezes down to just 21 miles across at its narrowest point. That's it. One exit. Moving the Ford into that water to close the distance to the target sounds like it solves the range problem. It doesn't. The Gulf averages about 160 feet deep. That's shallow enough that a nuclear carrier, a ship that displaces over 100,000 tons, has almost no room to maneuver, no ability to run, and nowhere to hide. You're basically sailing the most expensive warship ever built into a pond. And in a pond, mines are a completely different weapon than they are in open ocean. In deep water, a mine detonation sends a shock wave outward and downward, and a lot of that energy just dissipates into the water column. In 160 feet of water, there's nowhere for that pressure to go. it reflects off the bottom and hits the hull again. That doubled-up shock wave can break the keel of a ship that might have survived the same explosion in deeper water. Iran has mined the Gulf before, during the tanker wars of the 1980s, so this isn't a theoretical threat. It's a proven tactic they've already used successfully against large vessels. On top of the mines, both coastlines are lined with mobile anti-ship missile batteries. Iran operates systems like the Noor and Qatar missiles, and what makes them dangerous isn't just their range, it's that they move. They're not fixed installations you can identify, target, and destroy before the fort enters. They drive around, hide in terrain, fire, and relocate before anyone can shoot back. The Ford would be inside their maximum range the second it crossed into the Gulf, and those launchers would already be in position waiting for it. So what you actually have in the Persian Gulf is a kill box. That's not a dramatic term. It's a specific military concept, meaning a defined geographic area where the defender has pre-planned weapons coverage over every possible approach route. The adversary spent years setting this up. The mines, the missile batteries, the geography, it all works together. Shallow water amplifies explosions. The Strait of Hormuz gives Iran a choke point they can threaten to close, and the missile systems can engage from the moment the Ford commits to entering. There's also something beyond the military math here. The Strait of Hormuz moves roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. A carrier strike group transiting that strait under fire, with mines in the water, doesn't just put the ship at risk. It puts a fifth of global oil supply at risk of disruption. That's not a side effect. It's leverage the adversary holds just by controlling that geography. So here's the full picture. Stay outside the Gulf and the jets can't reach the target. Move the Ford inside the Gulf and the ship itself becomes the casualty. The carrier is caught between two versions of the same failure, and neither one ends with a successful strike. That's the carrier paradox, and it's why the next 72 hours aren't really about whether the Ford can fight. They're about whether there's a way to fight that doesn't require the Ford to move at all. Let me know in the comments whether you think the strike option or the diplomatic hold is the right call. The Ford isn't stuck because it's weak. It's stuck because the adversary built the trap years before this moment, using distance, shallow water, and mobile missiles instead of trying to match the Ford jet for jet.